The Blackwood River, a ribbon of silver under the relentless frontier moon, bore witness to Sarah Miller's sorrow. Each night, as twilight bled into the deep indigo of early colonial America, she would leave the hushed, fear-ridden settlement of Stone Creek and make her way to its banks. Here, amidst the whispering pines and the chill bite of the wilderness wind, she allowed her grief to unfurl. Her tears mingled with the cold current, each drop a testament to the unendurable loneliness that had become her constant companion in the years since the fever took everything. Stone Creek, nestled precariously on the edge of uncharted wilderness in the Massachusetts Bay Colony of 1678, was a community forged from hardship and bound by an unyielding faith. Life here was a daily struggle against the elements, against unseen dangers lurking in the woods, and often against the very human frailties exposed by isolation. When the Black Cough swept through the settlement a year past, it had claimed her parents, her younger sister, and her infant brother within a single harrowing fortnight. Sarah, miraculously, had survived, but survival, in Stone Creek's eyes, was not a blessing, but a sign of something unsettling. She was 22, but felt 100. Her once vibrant brown hair was dulled by constant neglect, her hands rough from toil in a desolate garden, her face etched with a quiet sorrow that seemed to repel rather than invite comfort. The townsfolk, God-fearing and fiercely superstitious, whispered behind clasped hands and lowered gazes. Why had Sarah been spared when good, righteous folk had been taken? Was she touched by ill fortune? Had she somehow angered the Almighty? Or worse, was there something unnatural about her, a dark shadow clinging to her that had allowed her to walk untouched through the valley of death? Reverend Elias Thorne, the town's spiritual pillar, a man whose sermons were laced with fire and brimstone, had not outright accused her, but his pointed references to unseen evils and those spared by the Lord for reasons unknown were clear enough. She was not banished like some unfortunate souls, for her family's plot of land was too central, too established. But she lived as if in a prison of isolation, each face averted, each voice lowered as she passed, a daily reinforcement of her pariah status. No one offered help. No one offered solace. Any young man who might have once considered courting her now steered clear. For to associate with Sarah Miller was to invite the town's wary suspicion onto oneself. Their social fabric was woven with fear, a tapestry where even the slightest deviation from the perceived norm could unravel a life. Tonight the wind was particularly sharp, biting through her thin shawl. She sat on her usual moss-covered stone by the river, the cold seeping into her bones, matching the chill in her heart. Tears flowed freely, silent and desperate. She missed her mother's gentle hum, her father's booming laughter, the innocent gurgle of her baby brother. She missed being seen as something other than a ghost walking amongst the living. A rustle in the undergrowth behind her made her stiffen, her breath catching. Her hand instinctively clutched the tattered shawl tighter. Wild animals, or worse, the unsettling quiet of the forest at night could often conceal human dangers. Rogue trappers, desperate men. She held her breath, listening. The rustling stopped. Then, a soft thud on the grass beside her. She didn't turn, fear paralyzing her. But instead of the growl of a beast or the gruff demand of a bandit, there was only the quiet creak of leather. Someone had sat down beside her. Her mind screamed in panic, but her body remained frozen. The man was a shadow, a presence rather than a discernible form in the dim moonlight. He said nothing. No greeting, no question, no demand. He simply sat. A long minute stretched into 2, then 3. The only sounds were the rushing river, the sighing wind, and her own ragged breathing. Finally, very slowly, Sarah turned her head. He was a large man, broad-shouldered even in the seated position, cloaked in a dark, worn leather coat. A wide-brimmed hat obscured his face, but she caught the gleam of dark, intense eyes watching the river. He carried a stillness about him, a quiet power that was both unsettling and strangely unthreatening. He wasn't looking at her, but at the water, as if sharing her vigil. She couldn't tell his age, but his presence felt ancient, weathered like the ancient trees surrounding them. After another stretch of silence, so profound it felt like a physical weight, he spoke. His voice was a low rumble, rough like river stones, yet surprisingly gentle. The river listens, he said, not to her, but to the darkness. It takes the sorrow and carries it away. Sarah said nothing, her throat tight. No one had spoken to her with such unburdened observation in a year. No one had acknowledged her pain, let alone offered such a strange, quiet comfort. He turned his head slightly, his eyes finally meeting hers. They were deep-set, dark, and held a profound weariness, a knowledge of suffering that mirrored her own. "Cale," he offered, his name like a stone dropped into quiet water. "Just Cale." Sarah found her voice, a fragile whisper. "Sarah," he nodded, a barely perceptible movement. No questions about why she was there, why she cried, just acceptance. It was a balm to her soul, a small, unexpected crack in the fortress of her loneliness. For the next few nights, Cale returned. He never sat too close, never spoke too much. He simply joined her by the river. Sometimes they sat in complete silence, sharing the vast expanse of the night. Other times he would offer a quiet observation about the stars, the sound of the wind, the way the light played on the water. Sarah, emboldened by his non-judgmental presence, began to speak haltingly at first. She spoke of the fever, of her family, of the silence that followed. She spoke of the town's fear, the whispers, the way it felt to be an outcast. Cale listened, his gaze fixed on the river, occasionally offering a low hum of understanding or a quiet, "Aye, that's a hard road." He never spoke much of himself, but through his sparse words she pieced together fragments. He was a wanderer, had seen much of this wild land. He carried a rifle with a practiced ease, and there was a subtle tension in his movements, a readiness that spoke of past dangers. He had a scar, a thin white line on his left cheekbone, visible when the moonlight caught his face just right. He hinted at a life lived outside the towns, pursuing men who broke the law. A bounty hunter, she guessed, though he never used the word. He spoke of disillusionment, of a weariness with the endless cycle of violence, of a craving for quiet and solitude. "There's no true justice in chasing men for coin, Sarah," he'd rumbled one night. "Only an endless hunger that eats at the soul." Their bond deepened, slowly, like the roots of an ancient tree. It was born of shared isolation, of understanding what it felt like to be branded, to carry the weight of a past that haunted them. Sarah found herself drawn to his quiet strength, his unwavering gaze, and the profound empathy in his silence. Cale, in turn, was captivated by her resilience, her gentle spirit that had not been entirely crushed by sorrow, and the raw honesty of her pain. He saw the woman, not the whispers. She saw the man, not the shadows of his past. Their quiet ritual, however, did not go unnoticed. Stone Creek was a small place, and secrets rarely stayed buried. Jeremiah Cole, a gaunt, self-righteous deacon whose piety often bordered on cruel judgment, had observed Sarah's nightly excursions. When he saw Cale, a stranger of imposing stature and unsettling stillness, joining her, his suspicions curdled into conviction. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, Reverend," Deacon Cole intoned during a particularly chilling sermon one Sunday, "and sometimes the wicked are revealed through their associations. The unholy are drawn to the unholy, like flies to sorrow." His gaze, sharp and accusatory, flickered towards Sarah, seated alone in the back pew, her head bowed. The whispers in town grew louder, bolder. "She's bewitched him. He's a man of ill repute, clearly. Like draws to like, as the good book says." Sarah felt the cold weight of their judgment, but this time it was different. This time she wasn't alone. One crisp afternoon, Reverend Thorne, flanked by Deacon Cole and the town's two sternest constables, appeared at Sarah's cabin. Her heart pounded, a familiar fear rising. "Sister Miller," Reverend Thorne began, his voice laced with unctuous authority, "it has come to our attention that you entertain a stranger by the river each night, a man whose presence causes unease among the flock." Sarah met his gaze, her chin trembling slightly but holding firm. "He is no stranger. He is Cale. He has offered me no harm, only quiet company." "Quiet company with a man of no known kin, no known trade?" Deacon Cole sneered, stepping forward. "Such associations only confirm what many have whispered since the fever, Sarah Miller. that there is a darkness about you. There is no darkness about me, Sarah cried, her voice rising with a year's worth of suppressed anger. Only sorrow. And if Kale has a shadow, it is no blacker than the judgment you cast upon those who suffer. Just then, Kale emerged from the tree line behind her cabin, an axe in his hand, having been chopping firewood. He saw the scene, his dark eyes narrowing. His hand instinctively went to the hilt of his concealed hunting knife. "This is the man, Reverend," Deacon Cole exclaimed, pointing a shaking finger. "A vagrant, a ruffian." Reverend Thorne cleared his throat. "Mr. Kale, we ask you for the peace of this community to move on. Your presence here is disruptive. Sister Miller needs to find her solace in the Lord, not in worldly companions." Kale stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the Reverend, a dangerous calm in his demeanor. "And where was your Lord, Reverend, when this woman lost her family? Where was the peace of this community when it turned its back on her, when it left her to drown in her grief, alone?" His voice was low, but it carried an undeniable force that silenced even Deacon Cole. "I have caused no harm. I have taken no coin. I have merely offered a quiet presence to a soul in desperate need of one." The Reverend, taken aback by Kale's defiance, stiffened. "We will not have lawless men disturbing the order of Stone Creek. Depart at once, or face the consequences." "And what consequences might those be, Reverend?" Kale challenged, his gaze hardening. Before the Reverend could answer, a new voice cut through the tension. "Hold there, Kale Blackwood. I believe those consequences are mine to deliver." All eyes turned to the trail leading into town. Standing there, silhouetted against the afternoon sun, was a man on horseback, lean and wiry, with a cold, predatory glint in his eyes. Beside him stood two grim-faced riders. Sarah's blood ran cold. This was not a local lawman. This was something far more dangerous. Kale's entire body tensed. "Jedediah Thorne," he rumbled, his voice devoid of emotion. "I might have known." Jedediah dismounted, a cruel smile on his lips. "Word travels, Kale, especially when there's coin attached to your head. The territorial governor wants you. The charges still stand. Robbery, murder, and now consorting with undesirable elements." He glanced at Sarah with thinly veiled contempt. Reverend Thorne gasped. "Bounty hunter, you are a wanted man." "Aye," Kale replied, his eyes never leaving Jedediah. "Wanted by men who twist the truth, just as some here twist the truth about Sarah." He turned to the Reverend and the townsfolk, his voice clear and resolute. "I was a bounty hunter, yes, but I left that life after a job that broke me. A job where I saw innocent blood spilled and justice bought. And the charges Jedediah speaks of, they are lies spun by a powerful, corrupt land baron whose schemes I uncovered. I defended myself against his hired thugs, and one of them died. He used his influence to brand me a murderer, to silence me." Sarah stepped to Kale's side, her hand instinctively finding his, a silent declaration of solidarity. She would not let him face this alone. This man who had sat with her in her grief, who had seen her truth, deserved no less. Jedediah sneered. "A convenient tale, outlaw, but the warrant is signed." He signaled his men. Kale pushed Sarah gently behind him. "I won't run anymore, Jedediah. Not from lies." He drew his hunting knife, its blade glinting. It wasn't a move of aggression, but of readiness, a silent promise to defend what little he had left to protect. "Stop this!" Sarah cried out, stepping forward. "He speaks the truth. He tried to help innocent people." Reverend Thorne and Deacon Cole watched, horrified as their carefully constructed order shattered. The townspeople who had gathered now murmured with a mix of fear and dawning confusion. Kale's story, coupled with Sarah's fierce defense, began to chip away at their long-held convictions. Jedediah advanced, unfazed. "The law cares not for your sob stories, Kale." In that moment, a young man from the crowd, Thomas, a blacksmith who had always held a quiet respect for Sarah's resilience, stepped forward. "Wait! I heard whispers from a trapper who came through last autumn. Said there was a big land swindle up north, and a bounty hunter who tried to warn folks. Said the Baron was a devil." His words, hesitant but firm, landed like stones in the uneasy silence. Other murmurs rose. Some had heard similar tales, Vague rumors of distant corruption. The seed of doubt once planted began to sprout in the fertile ground of frontier suspicion. Kale seized the moment. Jedediah here works for that baron, indirectly. He hunts down anyone who crosses his path. That's his true coin. Jedediah's face contorted in a snarl. He lunged, drawing his own pistol. Kale moved with a speed that belied his weariness, parrying the attack with a practiced grace honed by years of survival. The knife flashed, not to wound but to disarm. A sharp clang echoed as Jedediah's pistol flew from his hand, skittering across the dirt. Kale then used the flat of his hand, a swift, brutal strike to Jedediah's jaw. The bounty hunter crumpled. His two companions, seeing their leader felled, hesitated, then drew their own weapons. But Kale, standing over the unconscious Jedediah, fixed them with a stare that promised lethal force if they moved. "This is over. Turn back. Tell your master Kale Blackwood is no longer running, and tell him his time is coming." The two men, clearly outmatched and intimidated, glanced at each other, then at their fallen leader. With a grudging nod, they quickly remounted and galloped away, leaving the stunned community in their wake. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't the silence of fear or judgment, but of profound shock, then grudging respect. Reverend Thorne, his face pale, looked from the unconscious Jedediah to Kale, then finally truly looked at Sarah, who still stood defiantly by Kale's side. The truth, raw and undeniable, had just played out before their eyes. Kale turned to Sarah, his hand finding hers again, this time with a gentle squeeze. "Are you all right?" Sarah nodded, tears welling in her eyes. But these were tears of relief, of a profound, overwhelming sense of belonging. She was no longer alone, and the man beside her, the ex-bounty hunter, had faced down his past, not with violence for profit, but with quiet heroism for truth and for her. Reverend Thorne cleared his throat, his voice now subdued. "Mr. Blackwood, Sarah, it seems we have misjudged." The apology was stiff, but genuine. "The town, we owe you both a debt. And for you, Sarah, the Lord forgive us our blindness." Deacon Cole averted his gaze, shame etched on his face. The social fabric of Stone Creek, stretched and torn by fear and rigid beliefs, had begun to reweave itself, not around judgment, but around a newfound appreciation for courage and integrity. In the days that followed, Stone Creek slowly transformed. The whispers about Sarah ceased, replaced by hesitant smiles, then open kindness. The fear had lifted, replaced by a quiet awe for the woman who had endured and the man who had stood by her. Kale, his name cleared, was no longer an outcast but a respected figure. He helped the blacksmith, he guided trappers through dangerous territories, and he offered counsel with the quiet wisdom of a man who had seen the worst of humanity and still chose to seek the good. But Kale and Sarah, though no longer ostracized, both understood the fragility of settled life, the ever-present specter of judgment, and the lure of true freedom that lay beyond the confines of any town. Their bond, forged in sorrow and defiance, had deepened into a profound love, a quiet, unwavering understanding that transcended words. One crisp spring morning, as the ice finally melted from the Blackwood River and the first green shoots emerged from the thawing earth, a small, well-provisioned wagon stood outside Sarah's cabin. Kale stood beside it, his hand extended to Sarah, his eyes reflecting the vast, hopeful sky. Sarah took his hand, her heart swelling with a joy she thought she'd never feel again. She was leaving Stone Creek, not in disgrace but in love, choosing a future defined by hope rather than dictated by fear. Reverend Thorne and a few of the townsfolk stood watching from a distance, no longer with judgment, but with a quiet understanding. "Where will you go?" Reverend Thorne called out, his voice tinged with a wistful respect. Kale helped Sarah onto the wagon seat, then climbed beside her, taking the reins. He looked back at Stone Creek, a place of sorrow and redemption. "West, Reverend," Kale called out, his voice strong and clear, resonating with promise. "West, to where the river runs free and hearts can be true." Sarah leaned her head against Kale's shoulder, her gaze fixed on the boundless horizon. The wild, untamed wilderness stretched before them, a canvas upon which they would paint their own destiny. They rode off, two souls once broken, now whole, their love a silent testament to heroism found not in battle, but in the quiet courage to face the truth and to build a life together, unbound.